Hello, this is Eric Pica, President of Friends of the Earth United States, and you are listening to the 21st Century Radio with Dr. Sahara Hieronymus. Friends of the Earth is an organization that champions a healthy and just world, and you can learn more about us at www.foe.org.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. To learn more about Shut It Down, which, again, we're continuing our discussion of the 5 valve turners who shut down the tar sands pipeline in October of 2016, go to www.shutitdown.today. That's www.shutitdown.today, not a period, .today. Continuing our discussion is activist Leonard Higgins, who was one of the people who closed the valve, his in Montana. He joined their work and effort, describing himself as a Oregon Unitarian Universalist in Corvallis. He's also a board member of the National UU Ministry for Earth. As he says of himself, he retired in 2011 from a 31-year career with Oregon state government focused on managing large information technology projects. He became awakened to climate justice crisis with the Joanna Macy workshop in 2007. I haven't talked to her in years. And co-founded the Corvallis chapter of 350.org in 2012. Thank you so much for joining us, Leonard.
Thank you, Dr. Zoe. It's so good to be on your program.
All right, so we heard already from Michael that he went to prison for shutting down the valve. What happened to you, Leonard?
So the judge sentenced me to what's called a deferred sentence and put me of 3 years. And he put me on probation for those 3 years. If I don't break the law, federal, state, or local, during those 3 years, then I can petition the court to have the felony conviction removed from my record. On the other hand, if I break probation, he warned me that if he sees me back in his court, that he'll not only lock me away for the 10 years, but he may add time to that sentence.
Good Lord. So when something like this happens to an activist, people say, well, the white privileged people get treated so well, and if you have a darker skin, you'll end up in prison with no chance of getting out. What is your take on that perception?
That could not be more true, whether it's at the time of arrest, whether it's at booking, whether it's in court. The 5 of us that did the valve turner action absolutely benefited from being privileged, older white people.
With silver hair.
Yes.
We add. And there is truth to that. And all of us who grew up as activists doing it in our youth are now those silver-haired elders who are being called back to action. So,
and I feel we have an obligation as those elders and with our privilege to use that privilege in a way that others that are more vulnerable cannot.
And you say, speaking of yourself, you said you were morally and spiritually called to nonviolent direct action. Matthew Fox and the Order of the Sacred Earth work, is trying to also elevate activism into sort of a loosely connected network. Talk to us a bit about the Shut It Down movement and now the Extinction Rebellion. The xrebellion.org, as it's referred to online.
Yeah, boy, first I'll start with the Shut It Down folks. It was so good to hear Michael. I have to get a travel permit while I'm on probation to even travel outside Oregon. So I haven't seen Michael for a bit of time. And he and the other 4 valve turners are people of high integrity, of an appreciation for the sacred nature of life, and people who act on the responsibility that we have to each other and our communities. And I just am so touched hearing Michael and hearing the deep integrity of his life.
Yeah.
The Extinction Rebellion, I did a presentation. There was a rollout of Extinction Rebellion in the U.S. just last Saturday. And it started in the U.K., after about 2 years of work by an organization called Rising Up. They launched the Extinction Rebellion last October, and it's now around the world at about 200 sites We have about 35 of them in the U.S. I've been an organizer and am really excited. And so this is a slide that I presented last Saturday at the event we had in Eugene, Oregon. The slide asks, what will it take to bring the change that we need? And that's nonviolent direct action. And so we want to support and encourage an uprising of millions of Americans. That's what it's going to take, involving actions of peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience by some, and with others willing to support those that take action. The tactics include strikes, boycotts, walkouts, divestment, blockades, and other actions to stop the business as usual that's killing us. And this is the most hope I've had since we did the Valve Turner action in 2016. This is a movement that if we can galvanize people, if we can get an understanding of the dire threat we face and how real the threat of extinction is, we've got a chance.
You know, it's interesting that when we speak, there's a Super Bowl, and I wrote a book about, some apex species, the bear, the lion, the elephant, etc., and I pointed out that in this process of extinction that we face right now, the Anthropocene period, we're losing species all the time. 57% of the vertebrate population have already been deceased in the last 20 years or 50 years. And I've joked, boy, if all of a sudden somebody said, let's eliminate the football league, oh no, next week let's eliminate the soccer league, oh no, next week let's eliminate baseball, the entire world would be in an uproar. But when you tell them that the very foundation on which life depends on this planet is disappearing, it's, pass the beer.
I can't understand it, Dr. Zoe.
I don't either.
It just mystifies me as a father and a grandfather. It's a direct threat to them and to the people I love. And so what is it with the other parents and grandparents around me that they don't feel that threat in the same visceral way that I do? Yes.
And so what have you found? I mean, this is what I ask all activists because I struggle with myself. How can I reach more people? How can we be more effective? What can we do to enter the heart of our community?
And so the Extinction Rebellion, again, is the closest answer that I've seen. It's by no means a silver bullet. It's meant to speed the change, not to be the change. So it relies on the work of so many people that are working on alternative means of agriculture, transportation, the economy across the board. We need to change from an industrial growth approach to a sustainable approach. We've known that answer for a long time, right. But it's taken decades, and at the rate we're going, we're not seeing any progress. In the 30 years since Dr. Hansen testified before Congress, rather than seeing our emissions drop at all, we've gone from about 22 billion tons of carbon emissions into the atmosphere to last year a peak of 37 billion tons. Just an incredible growth in the annual emissions rather than the change that we need to see. And so there's three demands from Extinction Rebellion. One is that government and media and corporations tell the truth and act as if that truth is real. That's the way I felt when I closed that valve in Montana in the Valve Turner action. I was acting in a way that respected the emergency that we're in. The second demand is that by 2025, we be net zero on carbon emissions. And the truth is, there's no guarantee that's soon enough. And the third demand is that we replace our broken Congress, our broken democracy, with a truly representative body of people to help plan our way out of this emergency. And that needs to happen now. The IPCC has a history of underplaying the severity of this problem. And a lot of that is due to the fact that they are a mix of scientists and diplomats. It's hard enough to get a scientific consensus without a lot of conservatism creeping into that process. And then when you mix in the diplomats, they're just not telling us the whole truth. But even with that mix, they're telling us that over the next 12 years, we've got to cut carbon emissions in half. And they told that to us about a month ago, and that's an emergency, and we have taken no measures worldwide to do that.
Do you think, I haven't spent enough time really following up on China's changes in environmental laws and agriculture. Do you think there's a chance that a nation like China, which is certainly going to be the ruler or the most power broker, will change and that then other nations will follow?
They're certainly obviously showing more leadership than the United States.
Oh, well, we have
a
total maniac as a president.
Yeah,
so.
In the opposite direction.
No, we are. Yeah.
I have more faith in the populations around the world of the countries than I do the world governments.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That's a nice way to say it. I'm always looking for new language. You know, when you've been describing things in a certain context, it's very hard sometimes to imagine, well, how can I just rephrase that? And that's a beautiful way to say it because the people of the world want to survive. I've spent my life, as you have, working to support, agriculture that's healthful and sustainable, cleaning our water, keeping our air, not torturing animals, not torturing humans. You can't pick an arena in which any one of us have worked where we can point to and say, aha, we've arrived. Oh, yeah, it worked. We did it.
Oh, yeah, I told someone recently I went from alarm in 2016 when we did the valve turner action to a state of panic. Now, This is our last chance.
Well, I have faith in humanity, and even sometimes when we can't see the silver lining in the worst situation, I used to say, and this is 20 years ago, I used to say, well, it's all of us together, as a joke, and that earth changes would bring the world together, and it's very clear that is what's going to happen. The question is, how much suffering do we have to see on this planet before we come together as a global community of human beings, along with the other sentient kin, our animals?
Yes. Yeah, and we have in the U.S. added a fourth demand to the three that I mentioned, and that is for the rights of nature, the rights of non-human life, and for social justice, a recognition that there is a part of the population that is taking the brunt of this emergency already, and that we have a greater responsibility for the harm, and should be, rather than building walls and trying to expand our power and our profits, we should be reaching out and helping those people that are suffering as a result of our policies and our exploitation of the world's resources and people. It's so shameful.
Amen to that. We're going to take a little break. If you're just joining us, Leonard Higgins is with us. Leonard is one of the valve closers of Shut It Down. Go to shutitdown.today. He closed the valve in Montana, but he's also sharing with us now a new movement that I encourage everybody to go online and look at, www.xrebellion.org. That stands for Extinction Rebellion. There's ways everybody can take part in bringing good to the world. www.xrebellion.org.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gretchen Goldman, Research Director at the Center for Science and Democracy at the Union of Concerned Scientists. You can learn more about us at ucsusa.org. And you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara Hieronymus.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. Remember that all of our shows are archived online for free. You can download them at any time and share them with others. Go to www.21stcenturyradio.com. Our guest, if you're just joining us, is one of the valve turners of the tar sands pipeline, Leonard Higgins, who did what he needed to do in Montana and has paid a price for it with a sentence before judgment, was it? Or what was it said? Deferred?
A 3-year deferred sentence,
Deferred
which
sentence.
meant after 3 years of probation, I may be able to get the felony conviction removed.
And in the meantime, if you go out and you do another civil disobedience and you get arrested, does that then mean you get locked up and that's that?
Yeah, the judge told me if I was back in his court for that reason, breaking probation, that he would sentence me to the full 10-year maximum sentence in prison and might add additional years beyond that.
It's just unbelievable. You know, when you think about all the crimes and injustices done to millions of people at once by something and one person, it's unbelievable. Let this move forward, though. All right, so xrebellion.org, or Extinction Rebellion, is a movement worldwide of nonviolent civil disobedience. You know, and Stephen Schwartz wrote a book called The 8 Laws of Change, and I highly recommend it for everybody in this movement of ex-rebellion. He talks about when Gandhi was interviewed, his last interview, and he was asked, how'd you throw the British out of India? And he said, we didn't throw the British out of India, they left. And when asked how did he do that, he said, because we became what we wanted to see. And I think that's what you and everybody else have come to realize. There isn't somebody there to lead any of us. We all have to lead ourselves together.
Yeah, I have a Martin Luther King Jr. Quote, and I think it's perfect for this time period. It says, history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people. And by bad people, as Michael mentioned earlier, I will talk about the corporations that are profit-driven and the capture of government and media by those corporations, not that strident clamor, but the appalling silence of the good people. And so there are so many of us that value our freedoms that are just complacent, that are hypnotized by business as usual, by the daily comforts that we have. And our survival is resting on all of us stepping away from that complacency and taking action.
And so would a person in the listening audience says, well, I'm really afraid, and for good reason. You know, not everybody's as brave as you and Michael and the other valve turners, or even brave enough to go in to do a protest somewhere publicly. What can they do to kind of make sure that they're also taking part in this profound change that we need?
So they don't have to be among those that are actually doing the civil disobedience, that are breaking the law and may be arrested. For every one person that is doing civil disobedience, depending on how complicated the action is, it can require 2 to even 5 people that are not arrestable, that are doing the support. And that's so widespread. It would take a lot of time to talk about all the various roles that go into supporting civil disobedience. And beyond that, I would say that if they look at what's already happening in terms of extreme climate and the impacts of climate change, we all are so much more afraid of the impact on our children and our grandchildren of climate change than we are of the immediate consequences. Mm-hmm. I particularly want to reach out to folks in my age range that are retirement age, particularly those that are white and privileged. We have benefited the most from this fossil fuel era. We've had good jobs. We've lived comfortable lives. We've been complicit, honestly, in this crisis that we're at now. It's our responsibility to step up and take the risks and look out for the people that are being harmed every day.
When you look at the various arenas, I mean, we interview such a diverse group of incredible men and women around the world doing such good things, whoever they are, such out-of-the-boxers. What are some of the big blocks you're looking at, the kind of arenas that are the pegs? I mean, you've mentioned corporations and you've mentioned the oil and the this and the that. But for somebody who hasn't, grown up with the awareness you have or I have, and maybe they're just retiring now and they've never been involved in any environmental action, no animal, no anything, what's a good place to start?
So I would encourage them to start with Extinction Rebellion. Despite the terminology of rebellion, as I described, there's so much of the work is support for people that are actually going to take the action.
Mm-hmm.
There are work groups that run from finance to IT to media. There's a work group called Regenerative Culture. In the national group, there's a retired psychologist that is helping with that, helping people to grieve the harm that's already been done, to be energized through that grieving. A lot of the reason that people are not acting is it's so painful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Joanna Macy and the work that Reconnects helped me with that. I think it's really tied into that idea of regenerative culture. And that's, she talks about a spiral. You begin with deep gratitude. You move into honoring our pain. So many of us know how bad things are and are not facing it. And suicides are up. People have all sorts of depression. And I think it's harming us on a personal level that we aren't acting in response to the emergency. And so after honoring our pain, there's looking with new eyes and then going forth. And that process of being in gratitude, of truly grieving how bad things are and how much harm is already being done, seeing that we can live in ways that are so much better than this capitalist society. We've been lured and tempted and deceived into believing that the nice house, the nice car, all the consumer goods are a path to happiness, and that's just not true. We're not really giving anything up by stepping away from that. We're actually moving forward into more community, more connection, more meaningful work, a much better way of life than what we're stuck in.
Yeah, I mean, psychologically, there's this tendency toward dissociation, which I've talked about with animal activists and in the sanctuary movement in general. But it seems to be that's what humans do. It's sort of like the head in the sand syndrome, because it's way too painful to imagine you can't stop what's happening. Having been an activist my entire life since I was 14, I just feel so frustrated, I'm being quite frank about it, that I've been involved in so many campaigns, whether it's financial or environmental or social justice, and you still look at where we are in this country, and it's as if, why are we so primitive in our conscience, in our heartfelt love? I'm not very good anymore at finding answers. I find myself asking lots of questions.
Yeah, the hope I take is that we don't know how things are going to go.
Right.
And that part of how we got here is the arrogance of thinking that we had control, that we knew everything, and we don't. And there's no greater and more meaningful work than to try to save some of life.
Amen.
And I'm completely willing to do that work, even with the complete uncertainty of whether it's going to make any difference.
Well, and that's why I like what you said and what Michael said. The individual does matter, and I've always believed that each of us is born not for ourselves alone, but for the world. And if each one of us really opens up our heart to say, what is my passion? Where can I help? How can I make a difference? Even if it's just helping somebody walk across the street kindly, we don't know where each of these little molecules of energy will go, but it is certainly all connected. God bless you, Leonard, and your family, your children, your grandchildren, etc., etc., and thank you for your great and deliberate action. Go to www.xrebellion.org and www.shutitdown.today. Don't forget, 21stcenturyradio.com, where all these shows are archived for free online.
I hope we can all live more fearlessly. Stay connected and stay informed on the #1 news talk station, Talk Radio 680, WCBM, Baltimore, and WCBM.com.